and its landscape is almost tailor made for tiger sightings. A higher density of prey means tigers don't need enormous territories to sustain themselves. They'll walk along forest roads, cross paths with vehicles, or even rest near a water hole with a dozen jeeps parked nearby. Names like Maya, Matkasur, Sonam, Madhuri. It's well connected to Nagpur, which has strong air and rail connectivity, making it one of the most accessible. It didn't happen by accident or didn't happen by marketing. 20 years ago, if you asked a wildlife enthusiast in India where to go for the best tiger sighting opportunities, almost nobody would have said Tadoba. It would have been places like Pandavgarh, Kana, and of course Ranthambore. Tadoba was a relatively unknown animal, obscure reserve located in the middle of Maharashtra somewhere, rarely mentioned in the same breath as India's famous parks. And today, if you ask the same question, Tadoba comes up every single time. Every time we get a call, we said, listen, you want to see a tiger? We're thinking about Tadoba. And of course, being close to Bombay helps. Photographers actually plan entire trips around it. Repeat safari goers are planning trips around it, call it India's most reliable tiger reserve with guaranteed tiger sightings. And now, obviously, some have even nicknamed it as India's tiger capital. So, what's changed? How did a lesser known forest like Tadoba overtake some of India's most well known tiger reserves like Kana, Bandhavgarh, and Ranthambore and to become right at the top of the chain? This is the video is all about that. The real reasons behind why Tadoba is successful and why it might be the next or the smartest choice for your next safari. The geography is that makes it possible. Tadoba sits in Chandrapur district of Maharashtra, and its landscape is almost tailor made for tiger sightings. Unlike the dense, closed canopy forests where visibility drops up to a few meters, large parts of Tadoba are very dry, deciduous forests, interspread with a bunch of mixed forests and bamboo, and of course, having open grasslands and meadows. That combination matters enormously. Of course, tigers need cover to hunt, but open grasslands and lakes give visitors clear sight lines when a tiger does move through the open ground. Add to this a network of lakes and water bodies which are scattered throughout the reserve. Tadoba Lake being the most famous, and of course, you have two more water bodies called Pandarpauni 1 and 2. This is where you get maximum tiger sightings in the tourism area of Tadoba core. You get natural congestion and congregation points for prey animals. And in peak summer, when temperatures regions climb well past 40 degrees in this part of the world, wildlife has no choice but to actually move around these water sources. And that predictability, if you ask me, is priceless because anyone who wants to see a tiger will eventually find himself close to these water bodies, and virtually a tiger sighting is as good as guaranteed that time of the year. The prey base advantage. A tiger reserve is as good as its prey base. And this is where Tadoba has quietly built its advantage. The reserve has an exceptionally healthy population of spotted deer, sambar, gaur, wild boar, and also nilgai. We call it the blue bull, which is so gaur is the Indian bison. These are the most preferred prey species, and not just for the tiger. Tadoba also has a good population of other big cats like leopard and also predators like the wild dog. A higher density of prey means tigers don't need enormous territories to sustain themselves, which in turn means tiger density per square kilometer is unusually high in Tadoba. Even in the buffer areas like the core, you find a lot of these species of herbivores, which makes tiger survival and adaptability very good in the buffer areas of Tadoba. Multiple tigresses have successfully raised litters across generations because of the healthy prey base. Territories can sit close to each other without pushing tigers into the fringes of the park, which are inaccessible to the forest. And this, if you ask me, is critical. It's an underappreciated point because in many reserves, a poor prey base pushes tigers out of the reserve into remote corners where tourism vehicles rarely go. And in Tadoba, the abundant prey base keeps tigers active in areas that are very much within the safari range. Now, here's something that surprises a lot of first time visitors to Tadoba. Tadoba's tigers appear remarkably unbothered by the presence of gypsies around them. They'll walk along forest roads, cross paths with vehicles, or even rest near a water hole with a dozen jeeps parked nearby, rather seemingly indifferent to the attention. Now, this isn't an accident, and it hasn't happened because these tigers are somehow tamer. No, they are really wild tigers, so don't believe that these tigers are pets. What it is actually is a result of consistent, regulated tourist presence over years, following a fairly standard code of conduct, which means that you have vehicles which are keeping their distances from the tiger, engines which are mostly shut during a sighting, no chasing, no cutting off an animal's path. And over generation, tigers have learned that vehicles are neutral elements which have a non-threatening presence, not something to fear or actively avoid. And if you ask me, comparing this to the other parks where tiger sightings are relatively rarer, the tigers tend to bolt into cover the minute they hear about a vehicle approaching. Now, that reaction is often the result of tigers having seen far lesser vehicles, and probably have controlled human contact as well. Tadoba's tigers, by contrast, seem to carry almost about their business almost unfazed with the presence of vehicles around, which actually dramatically increases both the frequency and the quality of the sightings which tourists get. That's why Tadoba is the place where you get incredibly good tiger sightings. Every legendary tiger reserve like Ranthambore, Kanha, Bandhavgarh have their share of fairly well documented cats, which make that park famous. And Tadoba is no exception. But the speed at which some of the tigers in Tadoba become famous is for everybody to see. Names like Maya, Matkasur, Sonam, Madhuri, recently new names like Junabai, Kuwani, they have almost become celebrity status. Photographers plan their trips targeting these tigers, their new litter, and kind of a celebrity status is awarded to these tigers to actually see. Some of them have, of course, are no longer with us. Maya, in particular, became something big, something of an icon, if you ask me. A tigress whose territory conveniently overlapped with some of the most accessible and scenic parts of the park, making her one of the most photographed tigers in India for several years. Matkasur, a dominant male known for his massive size and imposing presence, drew visitors year after year to see him. In fact, if you ask me, um, Matkasur's son, Chota Matka, also carried out with that presence. So you have legend. Each year you have at least two or three tigers in Tadoba which people target, and they have litters. And not only in the core, even in the buffer. And these aren't just anecdotes, friends. They matter commercially and reputationally. The word of mouth from photographers who got extraordinary shots of these individual tigers spread across social media and wildlife photography communities helped build Tadoba's reputation organically. Sighting by sighting, photograph by photograph, long before travel companions actually get caught on this. So, yes, the famous tigers of Tadoba, if you want to see a few, let us know. None of this would actually matter without the solid forest department management. And this is where Tadoba deserves its fair share of real credit. In fact, if you see my Instagram videos, I have several times mentioned and a shout out to the Tadoba management. The Maharashtra Forest Department has invested significantly in anti poaching measures, controlling tourism zoning, infrastructure that balances conservation with experiences. One such example is actually converting so many buffer gates in Tadoba, which offer a lot of opportunities for tourists to see tigers, not especially in the core area. In fact, Tadoba's buffers areas are outstanding. I personally visit their buffer areas every year and have got incredible sightings in the buffer areas with mothers, cubs, etc. Also, Tadoba is simply easier to get to than some might expect. It's well connected to Nagpur, which has strong air and rail connectivity, making it one of the most accessible airports and national parks and some of the other remote reserves. This accessibility, if you ask me, if you combine it with the growing number of well run resorts and lodges around the buffer areas, makes it increasingly attractive to both Indian as well as international tourists looking for short, high probability tiger sighting trips. Also, this park operates multiple gates, and I was just mentioning it has so many zones: Moharli, Zari, Navegaon, North Tadoba, South Tadoba has a lot of buffer gates. Last I checked was north of 20 plus, and this helps spread tourism pressure wider rather than a particular zone, which helps people manage tourism. And this is essential because at the end of it, if you are working in a well balanced manner, you have lodges who are setting up properties, and you have gates which are allowing tourists, and you have so many lodges, you basically diversify the lodge pressure as well as the tourist pressure by diversifying the number of gates. And if you ask me, this is the single park in India which is known to do this. In my knowledge, I haven't seen many parks which have done this, and kudos to the management for actually pulling this along. Lastly, all whatever I've mentioned, what does all this mean for your safari plan? Now, if you're deciding where to go for a high probability tiger sighting, I believe you would have convinced yourself by now that Tadoba genuinely deserves a serious consideration. Sighting statistics from recent years consistently show very high probability of tiger sightings, and not only just individual tigers, tigers in groups, tigers with mothers with cubs, male tigers, mating tigers, sub-adults with mothers. All that is very, very common in Tadoba. And if you're planning, especially during the summer months of April to June, where water scarcity is high, well, believe me, that is certainly a very, very high and a good plan to actually carry out. I just came from Tadoba recently, and it was outstanding. If you ask me, I just lost count of the number of tigers, and I'll share my photographs very soon. But that said, it's worth setting the right expectations too. High probability doesn't mean guaranteed sightings. As much as I'm talking about Tadoba, there have been trips where I've seen nothing in Tadoba. So every safari element still carries that one bit of element of chance. This is not a zoo. This is basically working with your safari planner, like the game drive which I engage with for my safaris, how to curate the best knowledge and the best tiger sighting possibility into maximizing your tiger chances, even if it involves an element of chance. This is not a zoo. And you can, of course, combine this with other parts like booking multiple nights, choosing the right season, having the patience, and all of it statistically converges for you to get your best tiger sighting. And if you're looking to stack the odds meaningfully, yes, Tadoba is that place. So in my earlier video, you may have seen that how I've guided you to actually look to book 3 nights. You do that, you combine the right season, and you combine the right reserve. The chances of your seeing a tiger is extremely high. And that is why I think that requires a little bit of your element of planning well when it comes to tiger safaris. I would like to leave you with these thoughts. From whatever I've explained right now, Tadoba's rise from a lesser known reserve to one of India's most talked after reserves didn't happen by chance, it didn't happen by accident, or didn't happen by marketing. It happened because of ecology, because of management, and a bit of luck with individual tigers becoming icons of the park. It's a reminder to us that great wildlife tourism and great wildlife tourism destinations are built the same way that great tiger populations are. Slowly, carefully, and through a lot of consistent effort over years. And definitely not overnight. So if you're planning a trip to Tadoba and you've already been, or you're thinking about it and you had some incredible sightings, just drop it in our comments below. I'd love to hear from about your experience. And if you want to see what a truly unforgettable wildlife sighting looks like, don't miss my next video where I walk you through one of the most intense moments you can witness in the wild. Yes, keep watching for that one. Till then, take care. Have a lovely one.